We're going to have a chat amongst friends about a subject that's important and passionate, a subject that we're passionate about, company culture. But we just start off with Ryan, if you want to just give a quick hello and overview of who you are and what you do.
Sure. I'm Ryan Holmes. I'm the CEO of Hootsuite, which is a social media dashboard. We're 7.5 years old, and we have about nearly approaching 900 employees. So we've been scaling quite quickly, and culture is a very important part of our scaling.
Cool.
I'm Scott Cook, co-founder of Intuit, which we founded 32 years ago. We've got about 60 million users using QuickBooks, QuickBooks Online, TurboTax, Quicken, Mint, trying to improve people's financial lives forever.
All right, so software companies coming from very different markets, times of establishment, and stages of growth, and so I presume lots of learnings in there for what culture is and isn't. So for anybody that may be wondering what culture is, if you were to describe it in a tweet, how would you describe culture?
140 characters of culture. It's a very tough one. It's similar to people asking what brand means. A lot of people think brand means a logo. Culture is more than foosball tables. Culture is really the ethos, I think, of your organization. It's a lot of things that are intangible, but it is really just what makes people work every day and come in and their overall esprit de corps, I believe.
Scott, what do you think?
Yeah, culture is how we do things here.
Yeah.
It's what's our goal, our mission, who gets listened to, how decisions are made, who gets rewarded, what's important, and what isn't. It's how we do things here.
Yeah.
That's what culture is.
And to balance that out, maybe what culture isn't. You mentioned it's not foosball tables.
It's definitely not foosball tables. A lot of people get, we have a lot of young employees that come to work at Hootsuite. Our average age is 28 across the board. We have a lot of people that it's their first job, their first real job out of university, and we have to couch it that the things that you see, the foosball table and other things, they're nice to haves. It's not what we're about. We're about hustle, we're about hard work, and that these things can be distracting and confusing, and in some ways be counterintuitive to that. And so we have to kind of always set that tone expectation and reaffirm what we're truly about.
All right, so we'll come back to just that last bit on how you set that tone. Culture, what it isn't. Any thoughts?
That's a good answer. I'll go with that.
Okay. All right, so just on a very high level, how companies and particularly leadership approach culture. What are the things that you've seen that work and don't work, and are there any benefits that just high level that you think could be gained by leadership taking on culture as a core part of how they do things?
Let me start with the observation that every enterprise, every organization has a culture. Whether you intentionally thought about it or whether you've never uttered the word, there is a way we do things in the company. And in young companies, in startups and young companies, that culture is a perfect reflection of you, the founder and CEO. Now, this is not like children. Children, you can always blame DNA, this weird Gregor Mendel mixing, for how the children come out. Yeah. There's nurture and nature. But in a company, you hired every one of those people. You gave them their roles, you told them their goals, you told them how to get things done. The culture in the company is you. So if you don't like the culture, you have to start by recognizing where it came from, that it speaks about you.
So so that's interesting about how it is of you, and that everybody you add into the mix will organically create a culture. It's up to you to curate that. So just on that, I know you guys have done a lot of you've gone through a lot of growth in a very short period of time, where you guys went from what was it, 30 to 600 in
2 years.
2 years.
Yeah.
So you're putting, as you're throwing bodies into the pile, everybody's doing different things.
Yeah.
Communication starts to become a challenge. Maybe there's issues around trust, and that gets fragmented. How important or how much of a role does the actual people that are in the mix have in shaping that culture, and how does that connect with what you want as a leader?
Yeah. Well, I mean, to Scott's point, it starts with you and maybe a couple of co-founders, and the next person that comes into the company, who do they learn from? Yeah. They learn from those first few people, and the next person learns from the next person. I do some angel investing, and I talk to founders all the time, and one of the things that they talk with me about is, I've got this surly programmer that's just a beast to work with, but we really need a programmer. What should I do? Or we've got this horrible salesperson to work with, but we really need this sales guy because he kills his quota. And the unfortunate thing is, when you're a small company, if you keep that person around, they are going to train every person after them that that's an acceptable behavior. And so I tell them that they have to make the hard decision and cut that person at an early stage. Your first core team sets the cultural DNA for your company well down the road. I've famously said that I never want to work at a company with an HR department. And as we got bigger and bigger, I had at about 30 people, I had somebody come by and said that she wanted to do HR. And I said, I'm not looking for somebody to do HR, but I'm looking for an EA and an office manager. And she said, okay, I'll do that. And she took that on. She worked as my EA for about 8 months. And then I started seeing that we were thinking very similarly. She would bring lists of items that we'd have to address, and then she'd bring her proposed solution to them. And we started to have this sync of a mind meld of what we needed to deal with and how we dealt with it. And I started to have comfort with her. She later on became a gatekeeper, a cultural gatekeeper, and also able to ensure that we had a very high bar, and was a key factor to us being able to scale in that big way that you mentioned over a number of years. But at an early stage, you have to be so careful to be a guardian of the people coming in. When you add one bad person, a bad person, I don't think there's any bad people, but one person that's not aligned culturally or a poor performer into an organization that's of thousands and aligned culturally and in terms of performance and vision, that person usually will just eject out. They don't fit, they don't belong. But when that happens at an early stage, it's a problem.
Just talk about, there's a bit of an elephant in the room around that. Let's tease out that a little bit. I mean, so the only solution in that case is to fire the person. For a lot of...
Let me say two things. Before you dive in to fire the person, which may well be the right answer, first dive in to help the person change.
Sure.
Some people just need a boss to ride them, to work with them. In athletes, every great athlete has a coach. And if you ask even the most talented on the planet, Tiger Woods gives a bunch of credit to his coach to fix problems in the swing, problems in attitude, to get people to change and grow. So you don't want to be a company where people come in and you don't like them, boom, you fire them. You first want to tell the guy what's wrong.
Yeah.
Tell the problem that's creating for others in the organization. Tell them that you expect much more and much better, and then help them with the habit interventions, because habits are hard to change. There's a great book, The Power of Habit, that's worth reading on the subject. And then work with them to try to, you may want to talk to them every day or every other day and get feedback constantly on them and have their team help them change. But after a few weeks or a month or two and that doesn't work, then you got to let them go.
What do you think?
I think that is ideal in high growth environments when everybody's wearing lots of hats and putting out fires and this and that. You need people that are as aligned as possible. So I think if you can have good gatekeepers to try to ensure that people coming in are going to be as aligned as possible out of the gates, helps you at the forefront.
Yeah, you want to minimize hiring mistakes. So what you're talking about is really right.
Yeah. And then I agree. You have to coach people. You have to give them, a chance to change. But if they're not changing, if they're not aligned culturally, or they're not performing, then you have to make that decision. And one thing that also happens in high growth environments is you don't make those hard decisions, and you're like, well, I've got a whole bunch of other fires, and that's like kind of a small fire. But the problem is that small fire has a whole bunch of cascading effects, including poisoning of your A players. Are like, why do we have this person that's a C player on our team? They're killing me. And eventually those A players get demotivated and they start looking further abroad.
Yeah, but it is what you said. I mean, they may be a C player in your context, but you put them in another environment, another company, they could be the A player.
Yes, sure.
Yeah, and I guess that's the thing about firing is you're not killing the person.
That's right. Holding somebody in an environment where they're just not effective is wrong for them, as it is wrong for you.
Yeah. So you guys actually developed a cultural manifesto.
Yeah.
It's a document that I presume that you give it to people as they come in, as they're onboarding. It's part of the process.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was inspired by Netflix Cultural Manifesto, which is like very well regarded by the industry. My HR, my EA who became my VP of HR and talent, said at one point, hey, we need to, and this is very early stage again, we need to do, go through a mission, vision, values process. And I was like, oh man, that again is like such HR BS, and like really everybody should just know what we're doing. We're all on the same page here, let's just go and charge the hill. But the problem was, as you get bigger, people don't know. And so we started thinking about that, how do we onboard people better? More recently, we built out this manifesto. It's a bottoms-up manifesto, and I think it doesn't necessarily make sense to do this at an early stage, but it could be a good practice. And in future, in my next organization, I would probably look at doing this at a much earlier stage. But it's grassroots, it's bottoms-up. I had one of my writing team go around and talk with people within the organization and ask them what they felt that were the strong values of the company. And this is a document that was built out of that. And as she presented it back to me, I was so pleased because I felt really aligned with what people had presented back as their thoughts on the values of the company.
Yeah, so the people who are in the company get a chance to shape what it is that they're turning up to work on and who they're working with on a daily basis.
I think that's everybody's responsibility. Yeah. I don't ask anybody to check leadership at the door. I think everybody has an opportunity to be a leader in our company. Even if they're being managed by somebody, they can still be a leader. Whether that's in saying how they feel the company should be shaped and what they feel is important.
So this taps into a kind of an emerging trend, certainly in tech. I don't know if it's cascaded over into other industries, but there's an emerging trend around how leaders they're kind of a different leader today, right? Where they need to have a bit more connection to the people, a bit more empathy, a bit more, I guess, understanding about the people being happy and productive, and how that has a net benefit, or the opposite of a net benefit, a negative impact on the customers. So Scott, you've got a long career, certainly longer than Ryan and I, but you've probably seen a lot of change in terms of how companies approach people problems. We call it culture today. It may not have been called culture back then. Are there any changes that you've observed over the course of your career that you could give us some insight to, and maybe any lessons that you learned from that?
Yeah, let me tackle the topic of cultural change. When and if you recognize that for whatever reason there's something about your culture that you want to be different. And one of those is in the area you're talking, in how you drive innovation, how decisions are made, the role of people. When my dad learned management, he was in the US Navy during the war, Second World War, and it was top-down hierarchical. The boss told you what to do. And a lot of American industry inherited that from the railroad industry and from the military. Top-down, boss tells you what to do. But if you look at how innovation happens, and as companies grow in size, that can work in a really small team. But as companies grow in scale, the innovation quotient starts declining and declining. It gets harder and harder. The bigger companies get, often their innovation evaporates. Well, I could feel that happening at Intuit. I could feel that exact thing happening, and I wanted to put a stop to it. I got to get to the root cause of why were good ideas not flourishing? Why were people feeling frustrated?
How big were you at that point?
Oh, I think I'm slow to recognize this. We were in thousands of people at this
Yeah.
point when I was recognizing that. But I'm sure the seeds of that were present when we were 1,000.
Yeah.
But we were probably 4,000 or 5,000 people at that point. And so I looked at it and looked at some other companies that seemed to have done things, produced results that were different. And at least my conclusion that I came to is that the enemy for game-changing innovation is the hierarchy. The fact that you have bosses laddered up a hierarchy. That the difficulty to get a great idea from a new employee, someone who's close to the customer, close to the technology, it was so hard for that new idea to get momentum because there were too many people that could say no, or too many people that could help, too many bosses that could help, or too many questions. These people, the innovators would have well-meaning question after well-meaning question, and they get beat down. So we've made a wholesale change in changing the role of the leader. If you look at a company like Google, one reason that their search has innovated so rapidly and continues to is because they run it as a series of experiments where the engineers don't have to go get approval from the suits on running the experiment. They have a system, a software system in place to make it easy and have clear outcome metrics of here are the outcome metrics we're going to drive. Toyota does a similar thing on the assembly line. So we imported an experimentation system into the company where the leader's role is to set the grand vision. What's the grand challenge we're trying to solve? Like in tax, for TurboTax, we're trying to eliminate all the work. We're trying to have taxes are done so people don't have to do taxes. Now that's going to take us years or decades, but that's the grand vision. And then the leader puts in systems by which individual teams and individuals can run experiments oriented to that goal. Fast, cheap experiments. Along this process, we discovered Eric Ries in the Lean Startup, so we brought him in to coach. And increasingly, I tell our leaders, your job, whenever possible, and it's not always possible, is not to make the decision. Your job is to set up the environment so your people can run the experiment and have the experiment drive the decision. Now to do this, we had to change, Brad and I had to change how we lead. You know, we used to lead by people coming with a proposal and you'd ask, well, what's your proposal and what's your analysis? That only reinforced bad habits about analysis. We had to change. Now we ask, okay, what's your proposal? And what was the experiment you ran that tested the key leap of faith assumption? Oh, you haven't run an experiment yet. Well, how quickly are you going to run that experiment? And what leap of faith assumption are you going to test? So that change was, changing ourselves was really important to drive this change through our culture. And we're not done yet, but already, you know, it changes the nature of innovation when people believe you really want their ideas when you allow them to test their ideas, as opposed to have them go through the gauntlet of PowerPoint and persuasion.
And so I guess the cultural change doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, as you said. But I guess as you progress, there is a kind of a snowball effect where the more good stuff you're doing and the more happier people feel doing it, the more of good stuff they're going to do, right? Okay, so we're coming up close to the end of our conversation, but maybe we would touch finally on any learnings you could give to new CEOs or startup founders or people who have found themselves, you know, at a high growth company, leading it. Maybe they're not so sure as to you know where their priorities should lie. If there's any kind of quick tips that you think we could just share with the audience.
You know, just a really simple quick tip that I ran into a couple of years ago that I always mention to companies I'm talking with, advising and stuff. Jack Welch 2x2 matrix, performance on one matrix, company culture on the other side. And you basically think about your team and who sits in which box. So who are the people with high performance and high culture up in this quadrant? Yeah. Those are the people you want. Yeah. People that low performers, low culture, yeah. Those you try to coach or get out. Yeah. And the same with, you know, high culture and low performance and high performance, low culture. It's a great visualization tool, something that I share with my team and others.
If you want your company and your leaders to be learning and growing and getting better, You, as the leader, have to display that. You have to be learning about yourself. I remember after his first year as CEO, our current CEO, Brad Smith, went in front of the whole organization with a presentation and went down the list of mistakes he made in his first year as CEO. And then his promises on how he wasn't going to make those mistakes again. There he is role modeling what you want every one of your people to do. And to maximize the learning, get a coach. Because the one person in a company who is not getting accurate input about how you're doing is you. People polish the apple and tell you the good stuff, but they don't tell you how you're really doing. Get a coach, someone who can learn how you're really doing and then have the tough love on you that we all take to change habits, to truly grow and change what we're doing. So constant learning, yourself as the leader doing that, and then get a coach.
Okay, that's a great note to end on. Gents, thank you very much for your time.
Sure thing.
Thank you.
Scott Carter,
Good stuff.
Brian Holmes.